You can go ahead and. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming to our last and final workshop in our academic job workshop series of fall 2023. I'm Arif Ashraf. I'm an assistant professor at Howard University, and I will actually moderate today's event or session. So basically, this workshop is kind of divided into two parts. I'll introduce about the planned postdocs. After that, our today's speaker will guide us about research and chalk talk. At the next part, basically, we have Q&A, but throughout the session, you can actually feel free to put your questions in the chat. And me, Sunil, or Ari will try to pick up those questions, repeat it for our speaker, and then we'll go from there. So first of all, as you are here, that means these kind of events are actually useful for you, and probably you know a little bit about the planned postdocs. So I'll give you a very brief idea of what we do in the planned postdocs and how it can be useful for the postdocs and for the community. So our planned postdoc actually started, in fact, almost 4 years back. Me and Sunil actually came up with that idea to co-found an organization where we'll ensure the accessibility to the resource for all the postdocs around the globe. And with that idea, when we started with a very simple thing like Slack. But over the time, we have a very dedicated team of other postdocs who work together as a part of the leadership team. So any events you see we're doing it today or any other day, basically all of these things are done by these leadership team members. Apart from their whole day job, like they dedicate their time to make all these events successful. So we're really grateful for that. And at the same time, over the years when we're organizing all these events, we're very fortunate to have some mentor as part of our advisory board. So all of our mentors and the advisory board actually help us to shape and reshape all of the thought process, how we can actually make these events and create more resources useful for the community. And finally, how far we came in these 4 years. Basically, we organized many events, including like academic and industry jobs and research fellowship and all sort of things. And although we started with the Slack, that is a very good platform for all the communication we can do. So I will highly encourage you to, if you're not part of the Slack, be part of the Slack. You can ask any questions to the other postdocs. At the same time, all the events we actually organized over the years, you will find some information in our website. And also, most of these events are recorded and available, previous and future events in our YouTube channel. And we have a very active Twitter account where we post all of the things. But some cases we realized that some postdocs from China, they basically cannot access the Twitter. So one of our leadership team member, Pan, started this WeChat, which is currently maintained by Asif. So please feel free to go and join in WeChat. So talking about all of our events and activities over the years, so one of the things we started this year, because we felt that there is no comprehensive resource for academic job application, like how we write the cover letter, how we give a job talk, chalk talk, something like that. So we tried our best to find the very best mentors from our community to come and give and help us in a series of workshops. And today is actually the last part of our workshop series, where we'll actually learn more about research and chalk talk from Jose Dinini. So Jose Dinini is currently a professor in the biology department at Stanford University. He's not only a great scientist, but he's also a role model for many of plant biologists in our generation. So Jose, thank you so much for your time to come and talk with us. I'll stop sharing my screen so you can go ahead and share.
Is the hearing both good? Someone, I hear music. There we go.
Okay, cool. Now it's good.
Okay, and the slides are being shared, right? Okay, awesome. Well, yeah, thank you, Arif and Plant Postdocs for hosting this event. I think this is exactly the type of workshop and series of seminars that the community needs. We often have a lot of things in academia where there's no real formal training in how to do it, and yet we're expected to excel and perform well in lots of different situations. My hope is that by having these different forums and discussions, and in my case here, demystifying what the research and chalk talk is all about, we can both improve the ability of every individual to represent themselves effectively during the interview process, but also potentially get more plant biologists into universities so that we can support the important efforts that our community is making, both in terms of basic understanding, but also application and impact. Okay, so I'm going to present the slides, and at the end, I know the plant postdocs are going to post the slides. I also have a written out guide that I've generated, and you can get it at this QR code. We'll also post that, I think, to the plant postdocs website as well. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about basically the events that happened during your interview. And so you might want to have some understanding of what my experience is in that process. So I've gone on several rounds of interviews, depending upon the stage of my career. And the first independent position I got, there was one institute in Singapore that I needed to apply to, and there was one interview that I had. It was a shot in the dark, but fortunately, it worked out. The tricky part is that there was a chalk talk, but I was not informed really that there would be a chalk talk. It was supposed to be an informal discussion of my research. And so I had nothing prepared walking into that room to interview. So sometimes you do have unfamiliar situations, but hopefully if you've been invited to an interview, they've given you proper guidance on what they expect from the chalk talk. And if they haven't, definitely email them and get clarity. My second round was when I was looking to attain a position outside of Singapore and potentially either in Europe or in the US. And I had one job interview at Carnegie and one informal visit at the Sainsbury lab at Cambridge University. There were no chalk talks, just discussions with faculty. Okay, 2017, I was interested in moving from a research institute to a university where I could play a role in teaching as well as administration. And so I did a job search, both communicating with people in departments that I thought I might be interested in applying, so looking for opportunity hiring options, but also I applied to open advertisements as well. So there I went on 6 interviews, gave 6 seminars, and 3 of the places had chalk talks. Generally, the positions that were openly advertised were the ones in which I gave a chalk talk. Finally, last year I served as the chair of a search committee for a broad search in cell and molecular biology in our department. And there we had all of our candidates give chalk talks, and these were really important for evaluating the candidates. Okay, so if you're here listening to what I have to say, you're hoping that you will get an opportunity to attend a university or a research institute by invitations. And if you, someone's drawing on the slides. I don't know if we can prevent that from happening. So you see the yellow. Yeah, someone's doing that. But okay, in any case, congratulations, right? If you have an interview, you've already, managed to convince the evaluation committee that your research is impactful and likely going to be an asset to the university. So hopefully you can use that moment to build confidence, right? This whole process is really hard. It's challenging for everyone, and it's nerve-wracking as well. But take those moments where you get those accomplishments and try to have that build your confidence so that ultimately when you travel to the institute to present yourself, you can do it with confidence. I know it's easier said than done. But the committee believes in you. That's why they're inviting you to the interview. They wouldn't otherwise. Now, of course, they're evaluating you to see if you would be an effective colleague in their department, but you're evaluating the department as well. And so, be watchful, be mindful of the different experiences you have. And, if you have bad experiences, you don't have to go to that institute or university. It's about finding that good match between you and that institute that matters most. And chances are you go on the interview and they have to hire one out of maybe 5 candidates that they're interviewing. So it is the probabilities are low, but the connections that you make during these interviews, right? You may go on several interviews. These connections will last your entire career and will allow you to pursue research and interactions and collaborations far into the future, even if you don't end up going to that institute. So it's a really worthwhile experience. Okay, now in terms of, let me just see if I can clear that drawing. Well, I'll do that later. Okay, so the department or institute is interviewing you. What do they actually want to know? What are they evaluating about you? So first, they want to know, how much of an expert you are in your research area. Are you set up to be a leader in the area that you're studying? And do you understand that area of, say, plant biology, as well as anyone there in that room? How deep is your understanding there, and do you understand what the major questions are in your field? Have you thought carefully about what you want to do in the future? And that's, of course, an important part of the chalk talk, but also other discussions that you'll be having. Will you be a great mentor? So how well are you, what experiences in mentorship have you had, and how well do you interact with graduate students and other trainees during some of the events that the department will host? Are you excited to be in the department? Is this just one of many options that you're considering and you really have no buy-in in terms of the department and its mission? Or have you looked carefully at the department, looked to see who's in there, and tried to understand where that department is going? And is it a place that you could really see yourself thriving and also working towards the betterment of the department? Does your research fit well into the search area? I've seen instances where really outstanding candidates will come in and interview, but the way that they present their work and the way that they frame it and the questions that they're interested in really don't fit with the search area. And so even though they're outstanding scientists and candidates, they often don't rise to the top. So it's really important when you go to your interview to make sure that the work that you present, the way that you frame it, really fits well into that search area. So read that advertisement well. Okay, do you work well with others? You're going to be a lifelong colleague for many of the people in the department, and they want to know that you're someone who is easy to work with, that you enjoy working as a team on important topics, because there's lots of things that need to happen within a department, and they're looking for effective partners. Will you be connected to the department and the university? So are there people that you would potentially collaborate with, or other university initiatives that you might be able to leverage? And finally, and also quite important, is do you want to teach, and is this actually a passion of yours, and how have you demonstrated that in the past? Finally, what experience do you have in promoting DEI in academia? This is more than just a statement that you submit in many applications. You want to have demonstrated some track record of working in this area, ideally, or at least have a clear idea of how you might be able to promote DEI in the institute that you're interviewing at. Okay, so what are the parts of a typical interview? So they'll give you a schedule before you visit, and you'll do a number of things. There's going to be a research seminar that's going to be a part of that visit, usually 45 minutes, and that will be open to the whole school. So of course, lots of people from the department will attend, but there might be people from other departments that attend as well, and they may give advice or suggestions to the committee based on their expertise and evaluation of your talk. Often there is a chalk talk, not always, but in many cases, that also is about the same amount of time. Usually chalk talks are only open to faculty and members of the search committee. So unfortunately, trainees are often not part of that. So postdocs and graduate students are not a part of those chalk talks unless they're members of the search committee. You'll have meals with faculty, lunches and dinners, and that's a great moment to socialize and also find out other aspects of what life is like at the university or in the surrounding community. If you have children, or if building a family is important to you, this is an opportunity to suss out how easy it is to support a family at that location. You'll meet with graduate students and trainees, perhaps in a lunchtime setting. And these interactions are super critical. If the graduate students get a sense that you're empathetic, that you support good mentorship and good mentorship practices, if they think that you're going to be an advocate for their needs, they're going to be very supportive of your application. But if that's not communicated effectively to them, they can also say that we don't think this person will be a great mentor, and that can be a really big negative when the department is evaluating your application. And then finally, you'll meet with the chair. Often these conversations with the chair are about what sorts of resources are going to be provided with the position and what resources you might need in order to successfully pursue your research program at the university. So if you need a particular microscope or particular infrastructure for growing plants, this is an opportunity to start having those discussions. Okay, so what is the research? So the research seminar is one of the major pillars of your experience during the interview. And so it's important to think about, well, what does the research seminar say about you? What information are people trying to gather from that seminar? I think an important thing is integrity, right? So is your work rigorous, clearly presented, and transparent? Because this reflects not only the science that you do, but the science that you're going to advise and mentor when you have your own lab. Do you exhibit breadth in what you understand, or are you very narrowly focused on a very specific question? When you meet with faculty during your interview, do you have active, engaged conversations with them about their research, or is it very difficult for you to think beyond the specific work that you're doing? Depth. So in addition to being broad, of course, you are developing yourself as the world's leading expert in a particular area of research. How deeply do you understand that subfield? How deeply do you understand what the most important questions are and where the gaps in knowledge are? These are things that people are going to want to understand because if you join the faculty, you're going to be that expert in that department on this topic. And vision. So are you thinking about the research that you're going to do in a fearless manner? Are you do you have show signs that you're going to be ambitious in this area, but also very thoughtful and rigorous in how you pursue these approaches? This is an important thing because not only are you thinking about projects that are going to take you to year 5 of your lab, but what is year 10 of your lab going to look like? And do you have kind of an overarching vision for what how that will happen? Okay, so tips for organizing your research seminar. Stay on time. So generally the advice is, of course, it's about 1 minute per slide. And so if you have 45 minutes, you'll have about 45 slides. But stay on time. I was given a quote one time. A person in the audience is basically telling you, you can take your time giving your talk, but don't take mine, right? You have a specific amount of time. Don't go beyond that. The introduction. So think outside of the box when framing your question and think especially about who your audience is so that you can frame the question and the approach that you're using in a way that they can appreciate and understand. Titles on slides. Use the real estate space on your slide effectively, and the title is one of the most key aspects of your slides because that's essentially a summary of the main point of your slide. And people are going to be zoning in and out of concentration, right? That's just natural human nature. And titles on slides help them to come back and understand what they've missed as they start paying attention again. I would advise separating your talk into sections. So, the attention span of a person is going to be, 10, maybe 15 minutes. So break up your story so that you have these chunks where you can have mini introductions and conclusions, and so that they can understand that specific project. And if they've lost attention, they don't lose the whole story when you get to the next part of your seminar. A graphical summary can really be useful to build on as you're presenting your work. So it might be that you have 2 to 3 stories, and that helps to elaborate some sort of graphical summary that builds up in complexity over your presentation. You can also present this graphical summary at the end of your talk to leave it on the screen while you're addressing questions, because that can then inspire questions from the audience. And then finally, you're going to give a quick preview of your future work and your chalk talk that usually comes after the research seminar. So this might be 5 minutes of your talk is focused on future work. Okay, so these are some examples of those tips, right? One thing that I think is important is to use visuals that really draw attention to the work. So, here is an example of a slide that I often give, making the point that breeders focus on above ground traits and rarely look below ground. And this image kind of illustrates, these breeders looking at those above ground traits and missing what's below ground. Framing your work in creative ways. So, for example, in our lab, we study drought, but I can show a sad picture of some sad plants under drought conditions, and that doesn't really help describe the different ways in which drought might impact agriculture, or how water deficit affects plant physiology, right? So try to think of creative ways of introducing your topic, because we've seen hundreds of presentations that show sad plants in sad environments without really getting into what is happening in those situations. So think about your introduction in creative ways, and don't use easy shortcuts. On your visuals, don't just take snapshots from your figures, right? Remove the lettering. Even though this is really cool work, if I don't show that I spend enough time to think about how to present it and remove the A, B, and C, then that says something about how much time and attention I put towards communicating my work to other people. And then again on the title. So here's a slide with data, and I've seen many times a title on the slide that really has very little insight in it. So here, an experiment that led to an interesting result. That doesn't say what the result was. But if I had that as a summary, even if someone didn't understand the graphs I was presenting, they would at least know what I was trying to say about those data. Okay, a special note about interviewing in non-plant departments. There is a real difficulty in getting non-plant biologists excited about plant research. It absolutely can be done, but it is an extra level of effort that you're going to have to make to connecting with this audience. So avoid plant jargon as much as possible. As many plant-specific terms that you can relate to, say, biomedical terms can be useful. You don't necessarily have to do that across your entire talk, but at least when introducing certain, say, structures or processes in plants, can you find an equivalent or a similar process that happens in animals? Not to say that you're going to say, you're going to cure cancer by studying the cell wall, but you can say, well, the extracellular matrix is really critical for regulating cellular activities in animals, and the cell wall is a type of extracellular matrix for plants. Right? Yeah, we went over that. Now, it's important to state, you're using plants as a model, and why is that an excellent choice? Because there may be people in a non-plant department that say, well, we study the cell cycle, or we study the cytoskeleton in our system. Why is it important to answer these questions in plants? And of course, many job advertisements are starting to use words related to sustainability, and every part of the plant is useful, and plants are really critical for sustainability efforts. So you can make those connections. Environmental biology. Plants are extremely sensitive to environmental variation, and to a great extent, affect their physiologies and their development as a consequence, even more so than many animals. So I think as a model for that environmental responsiveness, they're great. Plants also function at the extremes, right? Plant cells are under tremendous pressures that animal cells are typically not under. And there are other aspects of plants that work in situations that are difficult to find parallels in animal systems. And I know in some pathways, mutants are inviable in animals, so that's a great rationale for using plants as well. Okay, so you've given your talk, your research talk, and now it's time to talk to the faculty about your future plans. And usually that occurs through this weird and crazy thing called a chalk talk. So why do we have chalk talks? So as I said, this is the major forum where you're going to talk about your future research goals. And because you haven't achieved them, of course, it's a chalk talk is a perfect kind of forum for communicating those things, because you are creating the future on that board during the event. It also is great at seeing how nimble you are intellectually, how well you can think on your feet, and also how you deal with stressful situations and communicate with your colleagues, right? You're going to get challenging questions. How well do you understand those questions when you're nervous, and how well can you think through the process and address that question in an informed and coherent manner? Can you convincingly argue for what you want to do? That is not only important in the context of interactions with other people on a one-on-one basis, but also as you're writing grants and writing papers in your own lab, you have to argue convincingly for that work. Oops, oh my goodness. Sorry, we just reset. And have you considered all the major caveats or complications of your experiments? That group of faculty that are going to be sitting in that chalk talk room are really going to be, doing their best to find all the caveats, all the potential difficulties or challenging areas that relate to your work. Have you thought about those things ahead of time, or and if there's something that's new to you that someone presents, how well can you incorporate that into your research plan? Now, a good chalk talk is like a really active and engaged conversation with a room of really, really bright and talented people, right? It can be a really fun experience. A bad chalk talk can feel like a qualifying exam, where the faculty, are doubtful and are, maybe even giving more suggestions for how you should be doing things rather than listening to your plans. So the goal is to walk into that room feeling confident and feeling like the expert in the area that you're working in. Okay, so what are the basic parts of the chalk talk? So usually you have a bit of time before the faculty walk into the room, and that's the point at which you are there with the board and a bunch of markers, and you're starting to prepare the board for the presentation that you're going to give. You're going to write your name and introductory material on that board. You may give an outline of the aims, and you want basically a significant amount of the space on that board to be filled before they walk in, so that you can start talking and you're not writing at the same time that you're trying to do that initial introduction of your work. You're going to be reintroducing yourself. So a significant number of people might not have attended your talk, or the talk might be recorded and they're going to look at it later. So you're going to reintroduce yourself and also state what the major takeaways from your research seminar are, so that everyone in the audience is informed. You're going to present your central question. I think it's really important to think about your work and think about it in terms of questions, key questions that you're trying to address with that work. And that question then guides, right, the hypotheses that you're going to communicate and the aims that you are going to communicate. Now, different resources say different things. I know some guides say only present 2 aims. I think it depends on what those aims are. So I would say 2 to 3, but 2 is a good number. One aim might be very straightforward. would be, essentially an extension of your postdoctoral studies. Some focus that is has a lot of supporting data, and will be, one of the, say, first papers that you publish as a part of your independent group. The other aim might be something that is much more risky. Perhaps you're developing a new technique, or you're testing a hypothesis that requires a lot of investment in resources to get to the final to the finish line. Okay, there's going to be a lot of questions. It is an open forum. They're going to ask questions from the very beginning to the end, but it's your responsibility to make sure that you're on time. So you're going to be constantly looking at the clock, and if there is a conversation that takes a very long time, it's okay for you to say, I'm really interested in the question that you're asking, but in order to be able to present all the aims, I think perhaps we can have a conversation after the chalk talk about the current concern you have. Right. Okay, so when you talk about the aims of your research, what are the key elements that should be in that description in your chalk talk? So first, the question. So what is the major question that you want to address with this research? Your hypothesis. So this is essentially your best guess as to what the answer to that question is. You want to present, I keep on pressing that button, sorry. You want to present this, what this answer is clearly, because this hypothesis is the thing that you're testing with your experimental approach and is going to guide the structure of the aim. Okay, approach. So you've described your question, you've talked about what you think your best guess is for what the answers to that question is, and then you're going to describe the set of experiments that will allow you to test that hypothesis. So this is, I'm going to make mutants in this pathway. I'm going to develop a sensor to monitor this process, right? This is, or I'm going to perform a single-cell RNA sequencing experiment of this tissue. This is that part of the aim. Expected results. So what do you think you're going to observe from the outcome of these experiments? And here you have a board. You can draw graphs that might show the data that you expect to get, or phenotypes if you're doing some sort of genetic analysis. And what is your interpretation of those data? If you get this result, what will that mean? If you get an alternative result, what will that mean? Alternative strategies. So this may be something that you directly present or is in response to questions that you get. Think about what the major challenges are in the success of your experimental approach, and are there alternatives that could be used both to support the results that you get from your primary approach, or if that primary approach doesn't work, what alternatives do you have? And finally, why does it all matter? So if you get the result, if you're testing your hypothesis and your hypothesis is consistent with the data, what does it mean and why does it matter, both within your field, but also more broadly? Other details you might want to communicate as well is who might do this work. So do you think that this project would be great for a graduate student? Is it more appropriate for a postdoc that has specific training in a research area? And what funding agency might you use to support this work? Having an understanding of that is important. Okay, chalk talk tips. So I like to think that the easiest way to put together a chalk talk is really to think of the board almost like a poster when you give a poster presentation at a meeting, right? There you have kind of, almost similar dimensions and space. And in a poster, of course, it's all permanent, right? It's all there, and you have to present what's on the poster printout. You can't change that. But on a board, it's a little bit more dynamic. And so there are certain parts of that, arrangement of information that can be erased and drawn over or added to. And so you can utilize that dynamic aspect to your advantage. Avoid writing anything down, just key titles and points. Speak directly to the audience, not the board. That requires practice because your initial intuition is going to be drawing and writing and talking at the same time. work off of prepared notes. So write out everything that you're going to present on, a page or two, and use that as a guide, because you're going to be up there. You might get nervous, you might forget where you're going, but if you have it down on that page, you know what you need to do next, and you can proceed from there. Something that I've seen more recently is that the faculty candidates will print out basically a version of that guide, of those notes, and hand it out at the beginning of the chalk talk. And that's then useful, right? It's a useful takeaway for people. They can remind themselves of what you were planning on doing, or they can look ahead so that they're not asking questions that you're already going to address later on. So I think it is a pretty good practice. And that's what this is. Okay, so I did this morning. It's not, beautiful. My handwriting is like chicken scratches, but nevertheless, this might be how you organize the board when you're giving a chalk talk, right? Who are you? What was the title perhaps of your talk, or an overarching title of what your research is about? You're going to present a summary of the main takeaways from your seminar, and then you're going to get into what your central hypothesis is, some amount of text or pictures or drawings that relate to that, and then you're going to get into your aims. Now, you might just describe in general terms aims 1 and aims 2, and then you might erase, say, the central hypothesis area of the board as you're illustrating specific parts of those aims. Okay, questions, as I said, are a major part of the evaluation process of the chalk talk. You want to be clear and concise. So imagine that if you spend, say, 3 to 5 minutes on a question, not only does that not allow lots of different questions to be asked, but also you may not have as many important things to say on that topic, and so try to be concise. Try not to sort of over-explain something or bleed into other explanations that you want to give, or talk about things that are irrelevant, right? So when someone asks a question, pause, think for a couple of seconds, and then provide a well-organized answer that's brief and concise, but to the point. And that allows everyone in the room to be able to ask questions. You're going to get questions that are of several different flavors. General curiosity, because someone in the audience is really interested in that topic. Maybe a lack of clarity. Maybe they don't understand something, or you didn't present something clearly, and so they'll want clarification of that. But you also will likely get questions that express doubt, that they don't agree with, say, your conclusions, or they think that this experimental approach is not really addressing your hypothesis clearly. Listen, remain calm, and try to find the truth in what they're saying. But if you disagree respectfully, provide a clear rationale for why you disagree, and then move on with the conversation. And hopefully they will appreciate your thoughtful way of addressing their doubt. Again, stay on time. That's your responsibility. Okay, so we're going to get into questions soon, but I do want to say that, by all means, I'm not the only authority or source of information on this topic. And part of my presentation is informed by these other resources that exist. So one of the best resources by far for anyone in academia is this book called Making the Right Moves, which was put together by Burroughs Wellcome Fund and the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. And it goes over lots of different things related to life in academia, but specifically they have information on going on job interviews and chalk talks and so forth. And now you can just download the whole thing online, which is great. The other resource is from ASCB, cell biology organization, and they have a really great tutorial on how to give an academic chalk talk that's really well written and presented. Again, a lot of the specific key pointers, I use this resource to inform me on that. Okay, so let's see where the Zoom went. now time for any questions that you have on this area.
Thank you so much, Jose. It was like really nice. I will pick some question from the chat, and also we have some question from the registered participants. So the first question is like, during the chalk talk, when asked where to obtain the first external grant, how should you respond? Could you please clarify the potential grant sources, like which sections within NSF and NIH can plant people ask for money, or any other resources like that?
Yes, so I have a slide for that I'll just bring up. Okay, so funding in plants is, has specific considerations that are different than biomedical research, and so it's useful to know what the different funding agencies are. Of course, there's NSF. NSF is a really key resource for plant biologists. They are interested in funding basic research, so understanding fundamental processes in plants. And there are two programs, IOS, which is Integrative Organismal Systems, I believe. So this funds things like, can fund developmental biology, physiology, plant environmental interactions. Also, they have plants pathogen and microbial interactions that are associated with that program. There's also this plant genome research program that is run out of iOS, I believe. And then there's also molecular cell biology as a program in NSF. This is actually where I got my first grant, where I had applied to understand how cis elements controlled gene expression programs in plants. So on more molecular side, the MCB program is a great resource. These grants tend to be smaller and maybe single investigator grants, so they may fund 1 to 2 positions over 3 to 4 years. So important, but also somewhat limited. The PGRP program does fund larger projects that might be multi-investigator, but often they want to emphasize that research should be in plants of greater agronomic importance, such as crops. NIH is an organization that does fund plant research. Often it's on the more basic side. So if you can think about the process that you're studying in a way that an animal biologist would appreciate and understand, then NIH might be a good place. And they have lots of different programs that fund things from cell biology to signaling to genomics, epigenetics, and development. So lots of different areas, even like plant evolution, I know has been funded through NIH. There, the grants are a little bit bigger. You might be funded for 2 to 3 with 2 to 3 positions for 4 to 5 years. The Department of Energy. So this is a major organization that funds my own research. They focus on bioenergy crops, algae, microbes, plant microbe interactions, plant soil microbe interactions. All of those things are very important at DOE. The grants can be large, but usually a collaborative nature. They do have a really great young investigator program that some of my trainees have received. And then USDA, I don't have as much experience with USDA. I applied once and they rejected me once. But they're usually, you're studying a process in a crop plant, and you might be wanting to demonstrate the importance of that process in that crop species or in a particular agricultural context. Both basic and applied questions are supported, but the level of support tends to be somewhat modest. And then other agencies do exist, and I'm not going to list all of them, but for example, the Defense Department does fund major research in plant biology. For example, they had a funding program to develop sort of TNT or bomb sniffing plants. So lots of really far out ideas, and they'll put out calls in areas where they want to develop kind of knowledge. And so you can look at those and see if your research is appropriate. But you wouldn't necessarily say in a job advertisement or in a job interview that I'm going to apply for DARPA funding, because you don't know what those calls might be.
Thank you so much, Jose. This was
Mhm.
really nice. Like you listed all of these things for us. So the next question from the chat is about sort of Chalk Talk. The person who asked, like, the two recent round of faculty interviews from our department were on Zoom. So job candidates use slides in combination with drawing on the notepad for their Chalk Talk. For in-person Chalk Talk, is it expected that everything relies on handwriting and drawing on a board?
I think it's going to depend upon the department and what they feel is a useful format. And so it can vary. I would say that in our department, it's exclusively with a board and pens, so no slides allowed at all. But when I was going to interview at UCSD in, I think in 2010, 2011, they were going to allow slides and I think some combination of slides and a board. So this is where you want it to be 100% crystal clear when you're invited and they give you kind of the schedule of events. Make it clear to you how what the structure of that Chalk Talk will be.
Awesome. The next question in the chat is like, what is your suggestion for a question that could throw you off track? We have similar kind of question like, what are the common mistakes actually you see during the Chalk Talk or research talk?
Yeah, so questions are mysterious by their nature. You don't necessarily know exactly what you're going to get. And I've certainly received questions that have thrown me off. I think everyone in the room knows we're all humans, right? And for example, if you are answering a question and you realize that for some reason you've gotten on a mental track that led you in the wrong direction, you could say, wait, let me try to re-answer that question and reconsider then what you're going to say and frame it in the way that is more intentional. That's perfectly acceptable. If there's a question that you don't understand, right? Like what is it that they're really asking? Ask them to clarify. Say, well, I think your question is asking this. Is that correct, right? Am I reframing the question in a way that I understand correctly? And they might say, oh yeah, that's what I want to know. Or they may say, no, I'm trying to ask this question. And then you can that gives you a little bit more time too to think about what the answer might be. But it's normal for questions sometimes to not make sense because they're coming from a different perspective. And if they have a question because of something they don't understand, it's because there was some miscommunication. So give space to that, acknowledge it, and hopefully you can come to a common understanding that helps you clarify things.
Okay, we have two following questions. The first one is, what happened? Let's say the department doesn't have a Chalk Talk, only the research talk. On that case, how you put these two things kind of together, what would be the best practice?
So I'm assuming if they don't have a Chalk Talk, there will be some type of, say, lunch with most of the faculty. So for example, when I interviewed at Carnegie, and I guess it was 2010, we didn't have a Chalk Talk, but it was a small faculty. So there's about nine investigators at Carnegie. So we could all sit in a room and eat lunch together. And then it was like a conversation where different faculty would say, okay, I had a question about your talk. X and X was very interesting, but had you considered this as a possibility, right? And so it will be there will be still moments where faculty are going to ask questions, and the same thing goes about answering them respectfully. You're going to get questions when you meet one-on-one with faculty as well. You're going to get questions perhaps at dinner, right? There's going to be a little bit of chit chat at the beginning, and then once people dig into their meals, then the knives come out, the real questions come out, and you can address them. So lots of opportunities. It's going to be exhausting. But again, like how often do you get this many people to think about the work that you're doing? So it's one of the best kind of consulting moments of your life, and it can improve your work in the end.
So true. The next question, the person who asked the question, he has like two part of that question. One is that like where to mention the future or current or potential collaborators, and also put the collaborators in a way that not making them you are relying on them, but kind of a part of your it is a requirement or you need them. And the other part of the question is that is it okay to mention about some part of the failures in the career, like when the researcher talk to make it more realistic or not?
Well, I'll take the second question last because I think I'm going to need to hear it again. But for the first one, collaborators, right? So there's you can think of collaborators at two levels, right? Both people who you might want to interact with at the university itself, or collaborations that you've established outside of the context of the university that are important for your work. I think the thing that they're going to want to know is what are the projects that you're the lead on? Because when faculty, when departments, when you're up for tenure, one of the key questions that the tenure committee is going to be charged with answering is, are you a recognized leader in the field that you're studying? And so to be recognized in that way means that you're likely going to be leading specific research initiatives where you're the lead PI on the grants and you're the senior author on the paper, the paper that would be published. And those are important because it shows leadership. You want to establish some track record of leadership, and that's going to be important. So definitely it's great to have collaborators, but and you can mention those, but make it very clear what you're leading and how you have alternative approaches, right? So that it's not all relying upon one particular collaborator. So I agree. Collaborators are both good and important, but communicate how you're the leader in that area. So the second part, can you say that again?
Yeah, so I asked to rephrase that question. In the meantime, I can go to the another question.
Okay.
Is the seminar usually before lunch and chalk talk after lunch? Like what the usual like a timing for the both talks?
So usually there might be 2 days of events. And so like at this last year, we had the research seminar the first day, but at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then the second day, the chalk talk would be in the morning. So around say 10 o'clock. And then you'll have meetings subsequently. So almost, it wouldn't make sense any other way. The research seminar will come first. The chalk talk will come second.
So the other question I got during the registration, like what are the kind of differentiating factors between the research talk and chalk talk? Maybe somehow, some point it looks like overlapping information.
Yeah, well, there is going to be, you want the two to be consistent with one another, right? So you're communicating your research vision and the main question that drives your work. And the work that you're doing as a postdoc should be a part of that vision and not necessarily separate. Now, I know some individuals, they work in a particular area in their postdoc, and then they transition to a slightly different area during their independent research. And that's fine, but it should appear as a part of a consistent arc, right? Of your research, because your postdoc, or in some cases some faculty go even after their graduate work, that's preparing you for what you're going to do next. So you need to talk about what that work is and how it prepares you to do what's next. What's next is then of course what you're focusing on for your chalk talk, but you introduce those key areas that you're going to focus on during your research talk. And that's really important because your research results that you present during that research seminar are is also a way that you're opening up the field and revealing what the most important questions are that you're going to address in your independent career, right? It should seem as if that the best questions weren't addressed in your postdoc, and then you're just cleaning things up for in your independent career. It should seem like your postdoc was really about opening up a field by a new technology or a new gene that you discovered, and it's that independent research career at the university or an institute that allows you to get to the meat of the process.
So Jose, we'll have the one last question for you. So for example, as a postdoc, we basically have lots of unpublished data that kind of lead our future research, or sometimes also we develop lots of material as a postdoc, which can be very independent for the current PI. So how much does it help to show all of these things, and what are the best place to put all this information?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I had a pretty short postdoc, 2.5 years. And I think it was actually challenging for me to talk about a lot of future research because I didn't have those resources in hand. If you have them, it's important to communicate them because that helps to de-risk projects, right? So for example, if you have an aim that you're going to propose and that aim would seem really risky, but you have a specific, we're seeing.
I'm just sharing this screen, don't worry.
Oh, okay. you're seeing you have some data that helps to de-risk that approach. Absolutely present it. Now, whether you present it in the research talk or you describe it in the chalk talk is going to be sort of your call. The research talks should be focused on kind of 2 to 3 coherent areas. And you don't want to rush through the main experiments that are very well done and fully established and published or about to be published, so that you could talk about preliminary data, right? So I would focus the research seminar on in terms of the major findings of your postdoctoral work, and you can talk about some of those preliminary results that support your aims during the chalk talk. Or if you have, for example, some data that is really critical for ensuring the success of an aim, that can be presented in that 5-minute preview of your chalk talk, but you have to be very careful, right, with how you use that time.
Awesome. Jose, thank you so much. We almost came to the end, and we have like 1 or 2 last announcements. One of them is like, we'll share all of the links and materials you use for today with all the participants after the workshop. And also these recordings will be available on the YouTube. And the biggest thing is that we want to thank Jose for his time, and it was amazing, like go through all of these things. And with this, basically, I cannot believe we came to the end of a very comprehensive academic job series workshop. And most importantly, all of the previous workshops are actually available on our YouTube channel. And this workshop recorded version will also be available. So please feel free to share. And you can look at our Twitter and the website for the future updates and events. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jose, once again, for your time and everything.
Okay, bye-bye, and good luck with the application process.
And